Pekko, what's an offer?
So offer is the starting point of space. Like this is a kind of a shift of perspective because most of the crypto economics and different forms of technology, they start from the token. We'll come to the token, but later. But rather we start from the offer, which is essentially the interaction in space. Let's break down the offer. Think of it as a programmed offer. Think of it not just an offer between two parties, but essentially n parties, which could be 5, 10, also 0, by the way. Let's make another observation, which is that if you think of something like a proposal, for, which is a basis, for example, for voting, or many other different decision mechanisms. Somebody proposes something and that becomes something to be decided, for example, a change in organization. What's the structure there? That structure essentially puts up something, then asks for people for input, often in the form of yes or no, if it's a singular voting. Could be something else. Now, if you compare that to, let's bring up a conventional offer of somebody selling something, somebody has some object or an access to a file and asks one token for it. Now, there's a difference in input between the proposal and the offer, but actually the operative function is largely the same. That something is proposed, it designates an interaction, that it can activate itself if, in the case of the more financial offer, it activates itself by the token coming in and executes. Whereas in the other, it activates itself by the yes or no vote. But essentially, because we have largely the same structure underneath, it points out how offer-like situation and the commitment to offers is a key operative pattern in our economy and in our governance. But there's one more quality I want to highlight. And this is that offer has an interesting quality of self-governing and scaling governance in a quite natural way. Anybody could offer anything, like something completely crazy. Here's a piece of garbage. I'm asking for 1 million tokens. Nothing breaks on that offer in the world. Like nobody will bat an eye for that happening. Now, if somebody commits to it, that effect expands and it modifies or changes the state of two agents. But if more people commit to it, if that's possible, the effect expands and grows.
One more like a key feature of the offer, why I think it's so interesting, and it has a long history. We can go to the logic of the gift of the offering, like the ritual offerings. But what the offer really does, it opens this interval, an opening to the potentiality of something happening.
Exactly.
That's what it does.
Actually, this is one of the key factors. Now, to have an economy, we have to agree upon a state. We have to agree that this person has 5 tokens in this and this wallet and this has 7. Otherwise, the economy breaks. From the offer, you can see that it's designated to create potential. What it says this could be. It's a format that is specifically tailored of saying what could be, what could change, and then defining the exact nature of that change, and then giving the governance power to anyone who can commit to it to activate that change. So it's precisely answering the problem created by the need of having a state in the economy in the first place. So it's almost like the layer of potential. The offers form a layer or network of potential over the network of state, which has to be agreed upon in order for economy and its instruments to be what they are. Let's put 2 concepts, like how a token can be thought as a unit of distribution. And both words, the unit and the distribution, are important here. So the token is something that unitizes, which means that it says this is a 1 and this is a 2, and this can be or cannot be 1.3. Can it have fractions, for example? So it's the existence of a unit or units, which is actually an important quality, even though it might seem sort of superfluous. But then secondly, the distribution. It means is there a possibility to transact it towards which offers? Is it completely open? And that also, of course, contains the question of its issuance, which can set its distribution logic, which could say, in a simple way, say only 1,000 of these will be issued and they will be residing here and they are governed by this and this. But that is also a distribution. And then once again, like if we look at all the ICOs, for example, yes, there is minting, this creation of an issuance, but how does issuance actually become active? All of them, Ethereum, etc., have been activated by offers. The offer is the interaction that brings it to the world. If you're saying you can get an Ether for Bitcoin, that's an offer. And this outlines the kind of high combinability and interplay between spaces unit. Let's make that practical. So an example. If you have a very simple token, there is currently no offers for it. There's probably then no any seeming value to that token. But let's say somebody creates an offer where that particular token could be used to buy something, which means that that offer would ask it for a transaction, moving, let's say, from you to somebody else. And then, of course, it could have a precise amount that it moves, and which will, say, give you an access to a file. Now the token has value, it has use value, but that use value becomes the kind of basis of estimating or evaluating that token in itself. But at the appearance of this offer, nothing changed in the token. The token is still the same unit, it's identical, but in terms of practicality, the token is very different. But now let's say that for this same token, another offer appears. And instead of asking it for transaction, it actually says, I will hold this for 3 days and then send it back to the owner. If you commit your token to this holding, you gain the right to, for example, vote or participate in any other manner in an organization, which we also talk about later. Once again, nothing changed in the token by the appearance of this offer. But now the token still became also a unit of governance. And it's still the same token. It might have value in terms of a token of purchase, but it's also a token of governance. And this is where we can see this combinability, that the token cares about the unitization, it cares about the distribution, which really provides to the whole architecture qualities that are sorely needed.
That's really, I think, like a really insightful way of kind of rethinking what the token is and what it can do.
Yeah.
And what is super important or kind of interesting for us also in the architecture of space, and we don't exactly yet know even what are all the consequences, but that all data can gain powers of a token.
Yes. And here it's good to highlight, or I think important even to highlight, one quality of the token, which comes from the system of space being inherently based on object capabilities, which are themselves based on rights. Like they have been developed out of the paradigm of rights to be rights between almost like software units in their state or kingdom. So why is this important here? It's kind of referred actually in the earlier examples, but if you think of the traditional way of tokens, we often see only the value or think about the value. But if the token is distributing a right, for example, a specific right to take part in some interaction, whether that's voting or whether that's actually seeing documents or whether that's ability to edit something, this makes it at the same time a part of architecture of governance and its tool of distribution. So this goes hand in hand, the economical side and the governance side, the organizational side. In this sense, when we think of token not just as a value distributor or unitizer, but also a way to highly send rights, distribute rights in a highly tailorable fashion. Just like the offer being largely the same structure as proposal, the token as distributor of capabilities or rights is another point where economy and organization map hand in hand, which is something we have discovered, that economy is ultimately just an organization. It's a form of organization, but it also creates the other side of when you're solving something for economy, you're solving something for composability of organizations.
This is also, I think, a really important point that we've been able to discover or reveal. And when you look at the etymology of economy, like oikonomia, I mean, we know that economy has a history.
Yeah.
It has not always been meant the same thing, like it has not always functioned in the same way. And the oikonomia, as in Greek, it's the household management.
Yeah.
And it was really important for the important concept for the Greeks, and they took a lot of effort to distinguish it from politics, from science, because it has a special nature. It was not a science. It had nothing to do with the truth. It was not about politics. It was this like because it didn't have any ground. It was like groundless, ad hoc. You can do it today. You can do it like it. Govern the household like this. Tomorrow in a different way, and kind of it was this ad hoc, constantly changing way of governing the household and its assets. Well, it's also pragmatic, and from there, through the birth of political economy, and then economy came this thought of as this semi-autonomous field of society with its own laws, and that economy has now, like we used to know it, it has come to an end, and it has really returned to its tradition or its original meaning as political economy.
That economy can be something, and this is of course in the concept of economic spaces, creating some kind of an organization sets different rules of economy within that. Like somebody might have a right of getting payment every month. That is a different economy, and they have that right within the scope of even a traditional corporation. But this is like designing not just from traditional patterns like a corporation, but designing from the ground up these sort of forms that can be then economic spaces and create different pockets of economy, which then can interact by offers and using offers to create ties between themselves, to create a larger network between the economic space.
So from the offer, the token, and then to organization.
Yes.
Which means basically just giving persistence to the relationship.
In a way, organization is almost like the simplest of the structures here, but it's also in a way fundamental. This is true of economy itself. Like we look at the tokens, we look at money, we look at the how much we have in our pockets, but the actual value of that money radiates from the organization. It radiates from the fact that there are offers for it. They radiate from the fact that there are structures that support it. And this is true of money, it's true of stocks, and it's true of tokens like Bitcoin. Take away the code of Bitcoin, take away the possibilities to transact it, all of that organization around them, and Bitcoin is nothing. So this is why organization is fundamental. But towards the structure, if we think of what we have already now, we have the offer in the sense of the programmed offer, the possibility to propose and create this sort of a modular path of governance. We have the tokens, but the tokens are not just value, but they can transfer and distribute capabilities. Now, if we just add towards that the possibility of establishing a pattern that says this is this organization, and saying that through this is the interaction that we is capable of, for example, modifying the organization in itself. It has to go through this proposal protocol, and it has a logic of towards that changing, and the rights towards, for example, voting on that are distributed by tokens, which then enable the system of governance to interact. And if that network of rights connected to it is recognized as a pattern, which is held by the system in a trustable way, we have a sense of organization. I think it's good to almost start from the verb organize, like I'll organize my table, which I probably should organize the table here. But if we think of that word, the kind of possibility to organize, that's, I think, the good way to start to think about organization in spaces terms. So if somebody creates an interesting pattern, somebody else could utilize the pattern, copy it, essentially kind of take the skeleton out and make their own instance of it. Of course, somebody could make a variation of it, offer it as, for example, this is a good bounty model, and people could plug that into their organizations, and so on and so forth. There is this sort of programmatic easiness, just like we take plugins to programs, etc. This can function in economy and organization. But furthermore, when you take such a pattern and when you execute such a pattern, like the offer executes itself, that execution doesn't have to come from your instance, from your domain. It can come from even the platform itself, which means that there is trustability. We can imply trustability to the very execution. And this is what we call scalability of trust, a system that can scale trust and not just have the trust in a token, which is, for example, like Bitcoin. The trust is in the token, but really the function of Bitcoin is it's the wallets, the transactions, which are not trustable, and we have gazillion million examples of this. Yeah. But this entails that the whole range of interaction can function in a trustable manner. This is precisely why economy needs to be able to scale its trust. So now that an organization, which also means even a single offer, can be executed, that we can trust that it will work in exactly this manner, that what its original version works and cannot be changed in its execution. We have a trustability on the whole operation. We can create a token, but then we can create its transactions when we can connect that by rights to units that function like wallets, which are organizations in and of themselves, and the whole operation is covered by trust. But the key thing we need here is the idea of a pattern. So this combination being agreed, this architecture of rights combined with interactions, then that offer and its protocol setting being the only thing that has the rights towards changing the organization. This is a way to create the capabilities of organizing by the pattern.
So when you think about it, it is really an event-based semiotics, or like it's pragmatic semiotic in the sense that with the offer you open up a possibility that this is what I want to do. There's this interval where something can happen. Yeah. Then the grammar allows you to start building towards that actually that intent, that what you want to do, what you are offering the possibility, it turns into an event.
Yes.
And that you can program.
Yeah, offer is essentially a designation of an event. It says this could happen, but it also traces how it would happen. But then it's also governance of an event, because then it's up to others to commit that the event happens and affects them in the designated manner. And so this combination of in the offer of being a tailor-made form for potential, but also being the form and designation of an interaction and the event that stems from that interaction is one of the key, I think, among the key qualities of the offer itself.
So why can we also say that governance becomes programmable with space?
Well, to start towards that, I would go back to the idea of object capabilities and their path from actually taking the paradigm of rights now, and then utilizing that to build, in a way, a governance between software objects, like in their own state, the kingdom. that coming from the concept of rights, and I would say particularly like pre-French Revolution, the construction of the concept of a citizen was operationalized by a concept of rights, which was what I call a kind of a double bind functionality. And by that I mean that you can have freedom of speech if you yield freedom of speech to another citizen. So you gain power because you give power. But this unit is also modular. This is freedom of speech, but then you can have a right to freedom of thought, or you can have a right to vote. So this modularity and this capability-based structure that the rights had is the base of object capabilities. But that means that object capabilities, especially when combined into something like the system of space and the functioning of the programmable offer, you can start to talk about an architecture of rights, programmable architectures of rights in itself. And here we're looking at...
What else is governance?
Yeah, what else is governance, exactly. But then we have the kind of flexibility of the software side of composing even complex forms and putting them in with a very much more simple interface of interaction, etc. All of these things that we have now gotten used to with applications, website, etc. This all enters towards the forming and utilizing of the governance itself.